Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and today we've got the pleasure of watching Rufus 994 from the European server playing in the new highest damage per minute in the game. It is the Błyskawica. Now, this vehicle trumps the Badger. It knocks it into second place with regards to damage per minute, and scarily enough, it also has like the highest kind of alpha for the highest damage per minute as well, with 800, although only at 50 meters. While this vehicle has a whopping 3,503.65 base damage per minute, that is only at 50 meters, and as soon as the gun reaches that point, then its damage drops off. At 50 meters, this vehicle is packing in 800 alpha damage, and while its HE shells, if they can penetrate, will still do 800 at any range, the same as the AP shells will do up to 50 meters. The AP shells just drop off massively down to like 300 damage at 500 meters. Meaning if you shoot beyond 500 meters, which is very much possible, your alpha damage scales down even below that. Now, if you want to know exactly how much damage the Błyskawica is going to be doing for Rufus in this battle, you can look just above the aiming indicator, and you'll see that when you're aiming at an enemy vehicle, as Rufus is doing there, he's checking how much alpha damage he's going to do, and it's 622 to the T95. So that's 624, as you can see on your screen right now, and that's a low roll for 560. So, but it's not like a low roll from 800 down to 560, which would be an impossibility in World of Tanks. So the Błyskawica goes from having the best damage per minute in the game at 50 meters down to probably like the worst damage per minute on any tier 10 tank at 500 meters at 1,313. So that means that this tank, it's absolutely wild in close quarters combat, but it's awful at sniping. Now, I've been trying to 3-mark this thing on my main account, and while I'm winning like 65% of my games, I think I'm probably burning a little bit too bright too early in the battle and not surviving for the late part of the game, as my combines are only about like 4k, where I need more like about 4.2 or 4.4 if I want to be 3-marking this tank. And it's kind of weird to me to thinking that maybe my aggression to get stuck in early while it's influencing the battle is not quite giving me the average damage in my losses, or maybe I'm getting isolated early on in the battle and being too impactful but dying before I manage to get those big combines. Really, doing 3,000 damage right at the start of the battle and crippling 2 entire enemy tanks before your team has had a chance to really suck and like get your team into a horrible disadvantage. I've been steamrolling like 2/3 of my battles playing the tank in that way. And while it is tempting, considering that you do have this kind of insane potential for close quarters combat, that if you get stuck in straight away, you can kind of force the engagements. It is horrible to not be able to just deal that damage at long range, and burning too brightly in a battle, it's probably not optimal from like a marks and like a pure damage perspective, which kind of throws a spanner in the works of that kind of mentality of, is it better to just do as much damage as you possibly can at the expense of maybe some of your allies and at the expense of the flow of the battle? And the answer is, well, probably not when it comes to just absolute win ratio. But who am I to say that people aren't maybe getting kind of like 70 to 75% win ratio solo in this vehicle by just playing purely for damage? Alright, so Rufus 994 has already had a great game of World of Tanks without losing a single hit point. They are boosting up that damage to an incredible amount here with a gun rammer, vents, and a vent purge directive. Now, personally, for me on my Błyskawica, I'm actually using the gun rammer directive to try and max that out. But remember, the vents, by pumping it up to that level, will allow the commander to be able to boost the crew by an extra percentage point, which will be fantastic. That's why the vent purging is just so great. But oh dear, that's not great. Rufus misses the cheeks of the Jagdpanzer 100, but luckily manages to bounce a 420 penetration shell from the gold round there from the Jagdpanzer 100. And remember, the Jägeru fired about 3 seconds before Rufus did with their miss, and then they fired once. Are they going to get another one in before the Jägeru reloads? Yes, they do, and that is just how terrifying this vehicle is. That for every time that Jagdpanzer can fire, this vehicle can fire twice. Once you've got the field mods that increase the rate of fire of this vehicle, as Rufus has. It's clear to me that they've either got none of the field mods or they've got all of the field mods and they've reduced their hit points with the penultimate field mod to get the extra 3% rate of fire. And Rufus is just tearing through the enemy team right now with 5,700 damage dealt, and they haven't even lost any hit points. Although I would argue that it's maybe a little bit fortunate that they haven't lost the hit points to the Jagdpanzer 100. So Rufus is trying to do one of the most hard missions in the game, TD15 Triumph, requiring them to do 8,000 damage, get 6 frags, and also win the battle. It's something that a lot of people just can't ever really manage to do inside World of Tanks. But Rufus only needs to hit another 2 shots with full hit points, albeit, and get another 3 kills if they want to get their hands on this. So we can see there the alpha damage of this vehicle down to about 630 at this distance. It's not bad, but the Badger would be better in this kind of a scenario with losing that much damage per minute. And I'd rather hit for much more frequently with the Badger at its 480 alpha damage than having the alpha damage drop from 800 to 650 on this tank and have a significantly worse rate of fire. But sometimes, like, just having that alpha damage is king inside World of Tanks. And while this tank, it's not nearly as flexible as the Badger because it only has 7 degrees of gun depression, its armor's not bad. And while I'd say the Badger still has better all-round armor, I feel like this thing has a harder lower plate to hit. Although, actually, when I look at it, probably not than a Badger. The Badger's middle part of the lower plate is horrible, but the edges are actually pretty good with how thick they are. So in this kind of a situation, maybe an HE shell would have been good there against the A Phase 1, but it probably still wouldn't have done 200 damage to the side of the tank. I think Rufus was still right to go for the gold ammo that they are exclusively firing in this battle. So to add to the gun rammer and the vents, Rufus has decided to use a rotation device, and that's going to make this thing quite nimble. I still think a turbo would have probably had a similar effect on the traverse speed of the tank and made it much faster forwards and backwards. And this thing's reverse speed, it's not great at 15. I personally end up using a durability device on this vehicle more than I do focusing on a turbo on this tank. And that's purely to be able to give myself that little bit of extra health so I can trade and to be able to keep the tracks on for an extra shot or two. And oh dear, Rufus's RNG is starting to come tumbling down there as they bounce off the T-57 heavy turret. And that's another thing that's bad about this tank, is that penetration on the gold of 320. And remember, this is APCR pen, 321 if we're being exact. That's not great. You know, other tier 10 tank destroyers, they're packing 375 with their gold rounds. And tanks like the Jagdpanzer 100 are packing 420 heat. And vehicles like the Hori 3 have got 360 AP, so that will have 5 degrees of normalization against angle surfaces. And so that means that the Błyskawica simply just can't compensate for dealing with really thick armor like on an IS-4. So this Błyskawica, it's a very frustrating tank to play quite often because it does have this insane potential, but it just hardly ever gets to use it. And you have a horrible gun arc, only 5 degrees to the left, 5 degrees to the right, which is unbelievably frustrating about the tank. The tank just, it's not this all-round insane overpowered vehicle that it would be if Wargaming to adjust little areas here. So I really think that Wargaming have actually got it right with this tank. They have created an insane vehicle that can literally just trounce anything in close quarters combat. If it manages to hit its shots and if it can manage to pen, which it can do, it's still got enough pen, especially if you're going full gold like Rufus is here. But there's enough annoying aspects of this vehicle to mean that it's just not the outrageous OP new tier 10 meta tank. So unfortunately, Rufus looks like they're getting flanked here by the IS-4, and they find themselves in a 2 versus 3 scenario. However, luckily the IS-4 is going to expose themselves for a little too long. They're actually going to miss the lower plate of the Błyskawica, and that is going to allow Rufus, no way he's going to reload before the IS-4 gets his tracks back on. That would be incredible, especially considering it looks like the IS-4 is using a durability device. Although remember, their track repair time would have been substantially increased by the artillery shells there. Man, we can see just how slow that Rufus is backwards in this tank. It looks like possibly they might have reduced the reverse speed of this vehicle to increase the engine power and the track repair time. Another reason why I do like to use a turbo on this tank. Otherwise, coming back around those corners is a little bit weak. But then again, this is the kind of tank that it hardly ever wants to actually take steps backwards. It usually only wants to just try and pressure its opponents and just get forwards. And talk about pressure its opponents and get forwards. IS-4 spotted. 612 average damage here. And oh no, it doesn't quite catch the IS-4 in the side. And again, that's just the weak gun handling that this vehicle has, that Rufus has decided to boost with that bounty rotation device. So Rufus is actually going to be loading a high explosive shell here, I guess because he's thinking about the IS-4 side scraping against them. Or maybe they're just thinking about dealing with the T-92 at long range. Probably a good play. They're going to switch back to the APCR when they're now in close quarters. Maybe they were thinking about catching that T-92 at long range, and when they got closer, they decided to go back with the APCR. Another passing mention should be made that this vehicle actually has the best shell velocity in World of Tanks. That's it, bar none, nothing. 2,000 meters a second. So if you want to just auto-aim at your opponents and just let rip, then this vehicle, it can be crazy at long range with regards to that. But remember that your alpha damage is dropping down to like 300 at 500 meters. So this tank has another such bizarre feature. Wargaming give it the best shell velocity, meaning that they kind of want it to snipe, but then they give it horrible alpha damage at long range. Wow, it's a real frustrating tank to play. And it's been one of the most roller coaster rides. I've had a 10,000 damage game in this vehicle, just like Rufus has already inside this battle, and they give a 10k finally. I love it, Rufus. I know how that feels. Haven't posted that one up on YouTube yet, but I've had so many just heartbreaks in this tank where it just frustrates the living daylights out of me, either with its slightly troll gun, its weak gun arc, its not perfect gun depression, its not perfect mobility, its not perfect armor, its rather weak lower plate. All of these kind of aspects of the tank drive me mad more than I think that the vehicle rewards me with its amazing potential. And I think definitely the most frustrating thing about the tank is its potential. It has such a crazy opportunity for doing so many mad things at close quarters combat that whenever you don't get to do that, you feel like you're failing. And for every game that a hero like Rufus has here, for the perfect result for the Błyskawica, I think there's a huge amount where the vehicle ends up feeling more frustrating than fun. But Rufus, take it away. Dead even on hit points, and it's now a 2 versus 2. And wow, Rufus's artillery gets a great shot in there against the side of the Conway. I don't know if that was an AP shell, but it doesn't really matter as Rufus avoids the Conway shell, puts one into the side, and due to that great rate of fire, follows it up before the tier 9 British tank destroyer could get away. And oh, it's the final showdown, and oh dear, the IS-4 gets a shot into Rufus. Okay, Rufus, nice and easy, just one more in. Oh, pillows at them, says Vinnie Jones. That's a disaster now as Rufus bounces one shell with the vehicle's horrible penetration. Now Rufus goes forwards, down to a one shot, forwards, forwards, forwards. Woo! Doesn't choke the final shell, and Rufus raises his gun in the excitement of this massive damage game, this massive carry in a vehicle that has so much potential, but just doesn't always live up to it. But Rufus definitely did in this battle, with an absolute stonking game of World of Tanks showing you what happens when the Błyskawica is allowed to do whatever it pleases. So just a massive game for Rufus here, just shy of 12,000 damage, destroying half of the enemy team, giving them a high caliber medal and a Radley Walters medal for those 8 kills. What a monster result for a monster player. And the only thing I didn't like, Rufus dumping in 162,000 credits of ammunition, but I know how you feel when you play this tank. There is nothing more frustrating with a tank that is literally depending on its damage per minute. It's depending that it puts all of those shells in. And considering there are 2 kinds of APCR, it's basically, do you just want to use the better ammo? It's not the same as other tanks that maybe have AP and APCR or AP and heat, where there are different mechanics for different situations. It's just whether you want to cheap out. And any one of the bouncers in this battle could have stopped Rufus from getting TD15, one of the hardest ones to do in the game, done with honors. So congratulations to you, Rufus, not only on this monster game, but also getting one of the hardest missions to do out the way. Congratulations to you for it, and thank you so much for uploading it on the What Replays website for the community to enjoy. I thoroughly did. That's why I wanted to feature it on YouTube today, and I hope all of you out there enjoyed it as much as I did. If you did, give the video a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And if you're watching this video as it's released on Monday, there's going to be a brand new token store to celebrate the Aquino tank weekend for 2024 that will be happening later this month. It's your opportunity to be able to get the ultra cool assault style for the T30, the one with the 10-year anniversary shenanigans going on, or the Dominion style, the Aquino style, the Oakwood style, or a 2D style with a giant maple leaf on top, as well as a whole host of other goodies. So come and get tokens starting from 3 o'clock UTC on Mondays and Fridays for the rest of July for just watching streams such as mine to be able to get yourself some fat loot inside World of Tanks. And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.